On a wonderful rainbow morning, the fox explored the forest, but no matter how far she ran, the forest did not end. Seeing a hole by a tree, she thought what a charming place it was and jumped into it. Lisa gradually begins to realize that she is in fact Ianel de Roachim. Ianel de Roachim was a princess of the Roachim Empire. The emperor adored her completely, even though she was last in line to the throne. It upset him that she was born a girl, but she was not at all interested in power because the throne belongs to her brother Agris de Roachim. She loved her family and was happy with them. Until one day I saw a chilling scene. The bloody father with a dagger in his chest sank to the ground. Ianel rushed towards him, looking up. She saw her brother with his hands stained with blood. She couldn't believe her eyes. Agris pulled the dagger from his father's body and swung it at his sister. Ianel collapsed to the ground, bleeding. She reached out to him, calling out to her brother with the last of her strength, to which he replied that she was disgusting. Ianel began to cry. The sound of the ocean. Ianel finds herself in some kind of dark space, starting to wonder if she has died. The girl feels the walls. This space is stuffy, as if locked up. The walls begin to crack. They collapse. It's light again, and a couple of strangers appear before my eyes. They are happy about her awakening. Ianel is confused, not understanding who they are also. This tail, where did it come from? Instead of hands, there are cat paws. Suddenly, one of the strangers transforms into a huge fox. Ianel involuntarily lets out a scream, but this scream does not at all resemble the cry of a person, rather the cry of an animal. Realizing that they scare her, the stranger reincarnates into a human, and finally the girl begins to understand that she died and was reborn into a divine beast. The castle becomes noisy. Everyone is discussing the news that the emperor died last night and Princess Ianel killed him. The speechless commander, hearing this, falls into memories. It was raining. He and Ianel were getting wet under a tree. She asked him if he was thinking about what he wanted to do in the future. After all, in her eyes, Lord Abelard was not an ordinary person. Ianel told him that she was sure that he would become a hero whose fame would spread throughout the world, and she beamed with a wonderful smile. Sunny forest dawn. Lanor, a fox in human form who became the new father of Ianel, is in search of a little fox sleeping in the bushes. The girl tried to deny the truth, being sure that it was just a dream, and now a month later she finally accepted the new reality. But I still didn't understand why a divine beast? Long ago, divine beasts emerged from the fragments of a god. Silver foxes, golden lions, blue whales, red wolves, white eagles, and green snakes. Divine beasts that inherited the power of God could communicate with nature and spirits. They took care of heaven and earth, seas and rivers. But one day trouble came. The beasts worked together to protect the continent, but no one has seen them since, and all because they hid in a distant forest and never showed themselves again. The forest gave way to a river. The father carried Ianel on his back, moving extremely quickly, which surprised her very much. Her parents always know where she is, even though they let her go for a walk alone. They still keep an eye on her. The egg from which Ianel hatched was half the size of the usual one. She couldn't get out of her shell for 10 years. My parents gave me the name Lucia. Moreover, after the disaster, the divine beasts lost contact with the spirits. But nevertheless, some part of the divine powers has been preserved. It can be used from birth, for example, to turn into a human. And if you have a talent for fencing or magic, you can direct your strength in this direction. Lucia, perhaps due to the fact that she remembers her past life, can't not only turn into a human, she doesn't even know how to talk. Ianel does not understand why his brother killed them. After all, the throne would never have passed her anyway. She really wants to ask him why. But the fox understands that even if she meets him, she still won't be able to speak. Lenore stroked her cheek and took her in his arms, asking if she was angry because he prevented her from conquering the north. Did he hurt her sense of dignity? Of course not. They arrived at a huge cave. Lenore called out to Seryu, Lucia's mother. Meanwhile, she practiced magic. The cave was very beautiful. Everything inside was covered in crystals that glowed brightly. Seria was worried when she saw them, asked if Lucia was sleeping, to which Lenore replied that she was not sleeping. She was pretty tired. The fox ran all the way to the northern border. Seria asks her daughter to be held in her arms, but the father also did not refuse hugs. Lucia was very awkward since she was still not used to their relationship. There was a letter on the table. Mother asked father to read it. Lenore laughed, asking how long Saria would talk so formally, because now they have Lucia and they can communicate absolutely freely. It depressed him that everyone still believed that he was her master. The father reads a letter in which it is written that the Emperor of Roachim has changed since the previous one was killed. Lucia trembled. At the end of the letter it is said that the murderer is Princess Ionel de Roachim. She killed the emperor and then committed suicide. Lucia is dumbfounded. She can't believe her ears. It's all Agris's plan. He killed her and their father and then put all the blame on her, and all for the sake of the throne. Lisa burst into tears. Mom and Dad began offering her treats, trying to somehow calm their daughter down. They were confused, not understanding her reaction. The father wondered how to calm her down, as he was worried that she would soon collapse without strength. Mom gently wiped the tears from her face, took her in her arms, and began to scratch, saying that everything was okay. But Lucia did not stop crying. She was infuriated by this injustice. She wanted to reveal the truth to everyone. Someday she will tell the whole world what happened. Opening her eyes, Lucia found that she had fallen asleep in bed with her fox parents. Well, at least she felt much better now. She thought that she should find out what was happening in the Empire as soon as possible. The longer she delayed, the more difficult it would be to reveal the truth, but Ionel alone could not get out of the forest. Lisa really wanted to talk, so she tried with all her might to concentrate and pronounce everything clearly. In an attempt to start speaking, she heard only an animal squeak. Reality is harsh. Determination alone cannot change it. Meanwhile, the parents woke up. They were glad that the baby was cheerful and assumed that Lucia was hungry. Mom fed her daughter berries from her hands. Lenore flashed his magic, saying that he needed to go to the human world. If he doesn't take action, Vermont could attack the forest. And besides, it wouldn't be a bad idea to pay a visit to the Imperial family. The silver fox is considered the patron saint of these lands. So my father decided to see what was going on there. Lucia jumped to the floor and ran to her father, clutching his leg. After all, she might not have had another chance. She had to persuade her father at any cost. But the mother suddenly screamed negatively, explaining that the human world is dangerous. The baby is not ready yet. She cannot let her go. Saria began to persuade her daughter to let her father go alone, and they would prepare well and go later. Ionel was not at a loss. She chose her father as a sacrifice, and turning on all her charm. Bulging her eyes, shedding a tear, she stared at him. Lenore began to think while he was thinking. Lucia began to cry. The father began to convince the mother that she would be safe with him, but Saria stressed that Lucia still had not completed the ceremony, to which Lenore objected, saying that there is only a name from the ceremony. Just a bunch of divine beasts will come to look at their girl. Lenore hugged Saria, convincing her not to worry. Her trust in him was directly proportional to Lucia's safety. Besides, the little girl really wanted to go. Lenore took the baby in his arms with an offer to go to the world of people. Lucia began to shine. They walked along a forest path. The father carried the baby wrapped in cloth. Since the mother was very worried, she swaddled her and gave them a blanket, cookies, and fruit for the journey. Before leaving for the human world, the father explained to the little girl that there are 3 immutable laws. Firstly, you cannot interfere with the course of history. Secondly, no one should know who you are. And finally, it is forbidden to fall in love with people. If they find out that Lucia breaks even one of the rules, she will be taken to the elders and forever locked in the divine forest. Although the father believes that all these taboos are sheer stupidity, suggesting that they pretend to follow them so as not to get into trouble, to which the baby squeaked approvingly. So they came to their home in the human world. A flag with the coat of arms of the Elharan family fluttered at the top of the castle. The watchman, seeing the Duke approaching, immediately ran to ring the bell. The gates opened. The guards came out to bow. More than 25 people came out to greet His Grace Duke Elharan, which greatly frightened the little girl. But the father proudly and securely held Lucia in his arms. Lenore Karl Elharan. The Duke became famous for diligently avoiding all kinds of banquets and receptions. He was so unsociable that he sometimes ignored the orders of the emperor himself, refusing to appear in the palace. Very few could boast of being close to him, but no one looked down on him. The Duke was master of the impregnable Idlebadur Mountains, and the ice wall to the north legends were made about his skillful use of a sword. But these were not such legends. The Duke indeed saved Roachim from the invasion of barbarians from the north. Rumors about him were truly contradictory. Some said he was a bloody killer who reveled in violence. Some imagined him as an ugly old man, and others as a handsome young man. After all, few people knew him personally. The Duke was an enigma, a mystery shrouded in darkness. There were many rumors about where he constantly disappeared from the castle. He is, after all, a divine beast. They entered the palace, walking along a long corridor lined with antique furniture and candlesticks. The butler Aiden stood in their way, which clearly bothered my father. Having greeted the Duke, the butler reminded him that a lot of work awaited him, and it would not hurt to return to it. Opening the door of the room, huge mountains of papers appeared before their eyes. Lenore was upset by the not-so-hospitable reception of the butler and attempted to propose organizing a banquet, to which Aiden responded negatively and pushed the Duke to the table. The little girl walked along the table playing with papers. The father asked the butler if anything had happened while he was away. Aiden told the Duke that the barbarians had found a way to overcome the wall. Lenore, with a stern expression on his face, noted that, be that as it may, they are just pathetic insects. Daddy noticed the frightened baby taking him in his arms. He began to smile, saying that later they would go on a hike with them. He took the baby to his chambers to calm her down. Lucia couldn't even imagine that Dad could be like this. He was always sweet and caring. And now the little girl rejected these thoughts. Because what kind of Duke he is? He's still her beloved dad. The father's heart melted. He was a little upset that he could not show off his lovely baby to anyone. Daddy asked Lucia to stay here and sleep while he finished with his business, to which the baby responded with a joyful squeak. She began to lie down when suddenly there was a flash of light. A portal appeared from which an unknown man emerged. His necklace seemed familiar to the fox. Was it really the Archmage himself? But where did he come from here? Appeared straight out of thin air. The Archmage went for some reason to the Duke's chambers. Suddenly, he noticed a fox and was no less surprised than she was. He sharply headed towards the fox, trying to catch it, but grabbed it by the tail, lifting the baby upside down, examining and identifying Lucia as a ball of fur. The fox was frightened. The rude Archmage had been looking at himself for a long time. She thought he held her in this position, examining and ridiculing her as if she were an ordinary, useless ball of fur. The fox was indignant because he himself burst into her place and began to insult her, although they did not even know each other. The baby's stomach began to growl. Despite such a sensitive situation, she felt very ashamed. At this time, the Duke discusses with the butler the incident with the barbarians. Aiden says that during the Duke's absence, Vermont was watching the wall, but as soon as he left, the enemies took advantage and attacked. 20 people were injured and many houses were destroyed. It is not yet clear why, but over the past month, the barbarians have become much more active. The father noticed that this began to happen just when Lucia was born. The butler was surprised and asked if it was really about that fox, to which the Duke smiled affirmatively, calling the baby her full beautiful name, Stella. But her parents call her Lucia Lenore, ordered the butler to serve her faithfully. Aiden sweetly agreed that the name was adorable. The Duke wonders what he has heard from the Roachim family. The butler presents 3 letters, taking them. Lenore smiles and remarks how funny the Roachim family is. The butler emphasizes the need to respond immediately. When suddenly a flash of light is visible outside the window, the father realizes that it is time for him to start raising someone. Vermont presents the fox with a plate of various fruits. The magicians looking into the room tensely try to stop the Archmage, reminding him that the fruits are needed for experiments and they cannot be fed to the fox cub. Rules are rules, and the Archmage is no exception. Annoyed, Vermont slams the door. Lucia looks around. There are even more books here than in the Imperial library. She wonders if they are in the Tower of Magicians, since those people seem to her similar to the magicians of the Order of Rune Hilt. Lucia greedily pounces on food. She was surprised at the presence of fruits from the divine forest in the castle. Were they really raised by wizards? The little girl enjoys the fruit, thinking that the magicians of Rune Hilta are really special. The Archmage stared at the little fox. He exhaled with the words, "Stupid little thing." Despite his insults, he gently wiped the fox's face. There was a knock on the door, notifying that Master Vermont had a visitor from Rochim. The Archmage is busy, but from behind the door, a plaintive voice was heard begging to be accepted, as he shouted that he would not leave until he personally met with the caretaker of the tower. The fox was extremely surprised that the man who stole her from her father's chambers was in such a high position. Vermont asked what he needed, to which he was told that the man wanted to reveal the truth about the death of the Emperor. The fox became excited. Reveal the truth about the death of the Emperor. The prince did his best to hide all the evidence and make Ionel guilty. He covered his tracks and received the much-desired throne. But he not only killed the princess, but also accused her of his terrible crime. And now everyone in Rochim considers the princess a villain for killing her own father. It seems the guest from Rochim has a different version of what happened. Looks like at least someone believes the princess is innocent. Lucia grabbed the Archmage's sleeve. Vermont wondered if the fox was still hungry. Well, at least Lucia has an appetite like a divine beast, he thought, which is why the little fox had to bite the nearby Archmage's finger. Vermont looked at the hand, puzzled. The fox aggressively stared at the Archmage as if hinting that the remaining fingers would be in danger if he did not accept such an important guest. The voice behind the door demanded a final answer. Vermont agreed to accept the guest, ordering the fox to remain here. The little girl tried to catch up with the Archmage, but the door slammed right in front of her. Ionel sat on the floor with her ears drooping. Of course, things are not as bad as they could be. At least there are still those who believe in the princess's innocence. As long as at least one person believes in it, there is a chance to reveal the truth. The fox happily jumped around the room and squealed joyfully. Vermont entered the room where 3 guests were waiting for him. The guests were very surprised by the appearance of the Archmage. Vermont thought irritably if they thought he wouldn't come out to them. Why did they continue to wait? The guests bow and thank the master for agreeing to meet with them. Vermont nobly sits down in a chair. The guests begin to introduce themselves when suddenly the Archmage stops them. Here their gender and title have no meaning. The Tower of Magicians is sovereign. That is, it is not subordinate to any state. The master suppressed their thoughts that the title gave them at least some advantage. Vermont insists on getting to the point the guests want to reveal the truth about the death of the past emperor. The master says that the truth is already known. The crazy princess killed her father in a fit and then committed suicide. The guests jumped up shouting that the princess would never do something like that. She had been set up. The Archmage did not hide his face distorted by the absurdity he had heard. Therefore, the guests from Rochim arrived to ask one of the Vermont magicians for help so they could prove the princess's innocence. The Archmage stood up negatively and rushed to the exit. The master said that they must offer something of equal value or fail. The guests jumped up and shouted in unison, "The name and honor of Peyran Abelard." He stopped wondering what kind of fool the commander of the Holy Order of Knights was. Lord Abelard said that the Archmage would agree if he knew that he was ready to put even his name on the line, to which Vermont agreed, providing the most experienced magician. Lucia sat sadly by the window. It was so high that clouds could be seen below. It seemed to her that if she fell, she would literally become a ball of fur. When suddenly she was tied by an unknown thread, shouting that she could fall, the Archmage entered the tower. Taking the little fox in his arms, he snapped his fingers, and the office immediately began to glow with a blue glow. They moved, opening their eyes. Lucia saw a sword pointed at Vermont's throat. In front of them stood their father, who happily tried to convey to the Archmage that it would not hurt to warn him if he wanted to babysit his little sister. To which Vermont asked whether it is necessary for a brother to ask permission to spend time with his sister Lucia, was very surprised that the Archmage was her brother. Although, if you think about it, they are similar. He has something of both parents in him. Conflict grew between the men. Father threatened that if Vermont were even a second late, he would destroy his turret, to which the brother objected, emphasizing that the Tower of Magicians was not a toy. Looking at this, the fox thought that Vermont definitely took after his father in character. Daddy took the baby in his arms and quietly asked if her brother had hurt her. The baby tensed, remembering their acquaintance. Be that as it may, he fed her and brought her back safe and sound. and I was also worried that she might fall out of the window." Lenore pitifully hugged the baby, to which the brother was indignant since he simply took her to feed. Vermont suddenly asked his father if this hairball was the reason for his leaving the castle. The father was upset when he heard his son call his sister, emphasizing that his mother would be very upset if he heard this. Lucia squeaked in confirmation. Dad gave the baby to the butler, saying that he would be back soon. Having saddled his horse, Lanner invited his son to take a ride and discuss everything in private. It was getting dark. Returning from his walk, the brother was gloomy. It was a surprise to him what his father had to go through. Dad happily grabbed the baby. At breakfast, Vermont had to spread jam on his bread, which he did not like. He emphasized that this was exploitation of labor. The father in turn reminded him that it would not hurt to work off the funds that his son borrowed to repair the tower. The son cried out in irritation that he had returned everything, but his father hastened to remind him of the interest. The father noticed with what pity Lucia was looking at her irritated brother and pushed her to go talk to him. Dad emphasized that they didn't even know each other's full names and introduced Luistella. The fox approached her brother and put her paw to his face. Vermont took the baby by the front paws and introduced himself. Lucia squealed joyfully. At first he seemed angry and rude to her, and although he can be arrogant at times, he is actually kind and caring. Vermont suddenly remembered and asked his father if he had heard anything about Peyran Abalod. Lucia pricked up her ears with interest. Peyran Abalod. He had neither title nor wealth, no one who could follow him. When he joined the Order of Knights, he had only one sword. And although the beginning was far from promising, after only 3 months, everyone in the palace knew about him. And that's why he won an unprecedented victory in the knightly tournament, on which the emperor personally congratulated him and appointed him as the bodyguard of the princess, but not the prince. He was incredibly talented. Such a person is fit to be the commander of the army, but the emperor loved his daughter so much that he appointed him as her personal bodyguard. Peyran did his job flawlessly. No more, no less. Yenal wanted to get closer to him, trying to talk over and over again. Somehow she casually offered her delicious candies, to which Abalod apologized and abruptly walked away. The princess tried to be kind to her ideal bodyguard, but could not melt the ice between them. They stood on the same grass, breathed the same air, but were never together. Therefore, Yenal did not trust him, and he apparently did not trust her. One day he came and said that he was going to the front and asked her consent. There was a war going on in the south. He could not simultaneously participate in it and be the princess's bodyguard. She decided that she would not disturb him and agreed. Their difficult relationship, which lasted a year, ultimately ended in nothing. Peyran won a series of high-profile victories in the south and led the country to victory. He received the well-deserved title of the Best Knight and became the commander-in-chief of the Holy Order, blessed by the Archbishop himself. Since then, they have not seen each other again. The princess only occasionally heard rumors about him. Vermont told his father about recent guests who came on behalf of Peyran, and that they claimed that the princess was innocent. Lisa was dumbfounded. He was her bodyguard for only a year. You can't even call them friends. The father remembered that while he was in the forest, he heard rumors about him. They say Peyran has gone crazy. Lenore noted that after Vermont's story, these rumors do not seem so groundless. No one in their right mind would throw their name around. The son talks about the upcoming meeting with Abalod. Lucia was very upset that they talked so actively about Peyran, and she didn't even have the opportunity to ask them if they were close to him. Vermont petted her, asking his father if it was too early to take her with him since she hatched a week ago. Lenore corrected his son a month ago. Vermont was very surprised because the baby was very small. The little fox drooped. She knows she's growing slowly, but she can't control it. The father reports that he is going to the capital. The prince has appointed him an audience. Vermont insists on going with his father. In addition, he promised to send one of the strongest magicians to Peyran. But is there a magician stronger than Vermont in the tower? There is a week left before the trip to the Imperial Palace. Meanwhile, Lenore decided to return to his duties as Duke. The butler again brought a mountain of documents that filled the entire table. The Duke really hoped it was a joke, to which Aiden replied in the negative. This is all that has accumulated during his absence. Dad asked Lucia to hold her paw. The butler noticed what an unusual color his daughter Lenora had. The proud father added that he had never seen anything like this in divine beasts. The fox tensed up. Aiden is a human, but what about the rules? The father, seeing his daughter's fright, began to calm her down, explaining that he was on the border of two worlds and there was no need to hide from him. Dad would have been happy to tell him more, but the butler insistently asked not to be distracted from work. Lenore left the butler and shut the Duke himself up and got to work. Lucia was terribly curious about what kind of border this was, but she didn't want to distract them. 7 hours later, the father is engrossed in work. 12 hours later, father is still at work. The little girl is running out of patience. He just sits and writes without even saying a word. Daddy hugged his daughter, noticing how tired she was, and invited her to take a walk and look around the palace. It's time to explore all the secret corners. Palace of the Princess of the Rochim Empire. The princess's palace is located directly opposite the emperor's palace, and both were left without owners. Just a month ago, the princess and the emperor walked to visit each other along long corridors. Agris could not believe that just a month ago a brutal murder took place here. Because of this incident, the nobles decided to leave the imperial palace. Nobody wanted to live near the crime scene. Except the prince enters the room where he is greeted by the red-haired princess, who was very glad to see him and was looking forward to their meeting. The princess says that from tomorrow, she will live here. He praises the magnificent palace and rejoices that its owner has died because now she will take her place. Sitting in the kitchen, Lucia is embarrassed by the attention of the cook and the maid who offer her cookies straight from the oven. Another kitchen worker runs up holding milk in his hands. Some time ago, the little girl ran around exploring the palace looking into every corner. But then she was attracted by the aroma. It looks like they are baking bread for dinner. It also smells like apples. What a sweet aroma. While the fox was sniffing around, the cook, not noticing her, almost stepped on his tail, got scared and fell. The kitchen workers were surprised to see a fox here. Suddenly they remember the Duke's words that he treats this little fox as his own daughter and orders him to treat her well. Now Lucia is eating pies. Of course, she is not hungry. But how can she resist when everything is fresh and looks so wonderful and most importantly smells? Suddenly, a familiar song is heard. Lucia looks with interest at where it could have sounded. The kitchen worker does not hold the pot of soup, and it flies straight towards the baby. The kitchen workers are horrified. Lucia is even more scared, and some unknown barrier protected the little fox. No one understood how it happened. Everyone rushed to her in concern. The man who could not hold the pan begged for forgiveness. The little girl is perplexed as to whether her abilities have really manifested themselves. No, she can't even turn into a human. Some unknown force protected her. A week later, father and son are going to the palace. Of course, no one planned to take Lucia with them, so she took control of the situation and deftly grabbed onto her father's back. But before the father had time to leave the room, Lucia was discovered by her brother. Daddy turned around and beamed, saying that he couldn't leave her. The kindest brother noticed that there is a risk for a fox cub to pick up fleas in the capital, to which the father suggested turning her into a human because his son knew how to do it. Contorting his face in indignation, the brother exhaled and began to perform magic. The room shone with a bright blue light. Lucia clung to her dad, but could not take her eyes off her brother. Suddenly, blue threads wrapped around her body and lifted her up. The Archmage cast a spell. The threads wrapped around the body so much that nothing was visible beyond them. The baby opened her eyes, and her surprised brother stood in front of her, saying that she was growing so slowly that she was still a baby. When the spell wears off, she will return to her normal form. The baby, realizing the human body, made an attempt to speak, but all that came out was a cute, childish cooing. The father claimed that Lucia called him dad, while the brother was absolutely sure that she said brother. A heavy atmosphere hung, and only Lucia understood that she only asked if she was a baby. Finally, the baby became human, but she didn't feel the difference, being still just as helpless. The quarrel between the men intensified, and the child began to roar. The bright sun illuminated the beautiful palace. The garden was fragrant with various flowers and trees. The father proudly carried the baby in his arms. The son asked if he really wanted to introduce her as his daughter, to which he received a positive answer. Lucia was special to him. Divine beasts are independent by nature. They leave their parents early and occupy their own territory. There is nothing unusual in developing human lands. His father left his parents when he was only a year old. But Lucia was different. A month has passed and she has not grown a bit. If she cannot stand up for herself, she will need a bodyguard. Duke Elharan. The guard notifies the guests that His Highness the Prince is waiting for them in the drawing room. The father looked around, gave the baby to his son, and went to the meeting. Lucia roared. She had not come this way to stay outside the door. Vermont approached the child's ear and hinted that if she continued to behave like this, she would turn into a handful of dust. The brother looked extremely convincing. It was difficult to disagree. In order to pass the time while waiting for his father, Vermont asked the maid to take them to the garden. The little girl's eyes did not dry out. She was very upset that she could not meet the prince. The brother picked a rose, showing his sister how beautiful the flowers were, because roses were rare in the north. But in the Imperial garden, they grew at every turn. Hiding behind the bushes, the brother calmed his sister down. He began to create magic. Blue balls began to swirl around and they became invisible. Vermont slipped through the guards. The little girl glanced at her brother, full of hope that he had some plans. They headed to the princess's palace. Entering the palace courtyard, they heard a woman scream, which attracted their attention. The princess furiously scolded the maid Marian as the tea was too hot. The fox recognized the princess. Her name is Bianca. The red-haired princess waved her hand and immediately another maid attacked Marianne. Mom died of malaria a month after Ionel was born. Her father protected her. There was a time when she was left completely alone. However, the maids took care of her. They filled the void in the girl's life. Becoming her friends, her family, they were important to the princess. Ionel knew that no one would treat them like she did, but Bianca's treatment and educational measures were simply monstrous. The child began to sob bitterly. She wanted it to stop so badly. For unknown reasons, the spell suddenly dissipated and the human baby turned into a fox cub. A melody sounded like that time in the kitchen, and the sky lit up with a bright pink flash which everyone in the palace saw. The sunny weather was replaced by an unexpected downpour. It seems that soon thunderclouds will cover the entire country. Marian was lying on the ground. The fox rushed towards her, tugging at her clothes. She tried to drag her to a dry place, but the baby only tore off a piece of fabric. Lucia covered the maid's face with her paws, trying to protect her from the rain, when suddenly someone covered them with a cloak. The little girl turned around, seeing a tall, dark-haired man in front of her. He was the commander of the Sacred Order of the Knights of Peyran Abalad. The maid began to dissolve. Lucia was scared. The brother reassured his sister by letting her know that they would take care of her magical threads, wrapped the baby, and pulled her to her brother. He hugged her and began to dry her. Vermont turned his gaze to Peyran, wondering what he was doing here. The Lord arrived on the prince's orders. The Archmage recalled the recent guests who came on his behalf. Peyran confirmed that he had indeed sent them to the Mage Tower. Vermont was infuriated that the divine beast was throwing its name around so easily. The little girl got scared and wondered if names really have some special meaning for divine beasts. And then she began to realize what she had just heard. Peyran is a divine beast. This explained why his father and brother talked so much about him. They are all divine beasts, which is why they are so familiar. The Lord stared at the baby. She tensed, thinking that he recognized her as soon as he wanted to speak. The brother introduced his sister. Vermont was angry that Peyran did not appear in the divine forest at all. Did not even know that someone was born, but be that as it may, he would fulfill his request as promised. Holding the baby with the help of magic, they disappeared into thin air. The guard notifies Sir Abalad that His Majesty is ready to receive him. The children returned to Lenore as soon as the audience ended and went to see the capital. Vermont sent Marian to the Duke's palace where she was treated. The little girl was finally able to meet her. The maid was very grateful to his lordship. Marian introduces herself, saying that she serves in the Imperial palace. She was the nanny of Princess Ionel. Her hands are covered in plasters and wrapped in bandages. Her face is covered in bruises. Lenore apologizes for having to disturb her in such a state, but he wants Marian to tell him about what Princess Ionel was like. At breakfast, the little girl admired the special cookies prepared by Duke Elharan. It was in the form of divine beasts. Father told how yesterday Marian said that the princess had been slandered. Ionel would never harm anyone, and certainly would not run away from responsibility. She had a kind disposition and a big heart. She was special. Marion had never met anyone like her. Hearing this, the baby began to cry. The father noticed that the princess treated the servants well. The child raised his head proudly. The meeting with the prince was quite strange. He said to bend the knee and obey him. Of course, with more flattering speeches, the father decided to express only the essence of the prince's appeal. The news shocked the children. It seemed to my father that if he refused, the prince would eat him alive, so he just smiled and left without answering. Vermont was on fire. The Elherons remained neutral from generation to generation. The prince, of course, knows about this and still tried to win the duke over to his side. He's probably up to something. It seems that the calm before the storm will soon end. The father thinks it's time to call Saria Ionel's current mother. And also, Haikon Vermont's mind became clouded. He asked his father why this mad dog was here, to which his father replied that he was already in the capital. Vermont jumped up, hitting the table with his hand. He was categorically against it. If they wish Lucia a bright future, they should not let this ignoramus near her. Lucia became curious. Her father gently took her in his arms and asked her not to pay attention to the fact that her brother did not listen to her dad. There was no need to follow his example. Brother and Lucia went to the city. He was in a hurry, believing that he needed to be on guard in case some cunning fox decided to deceive them. The brother was not going to waste his precious time on him, so with the help of magic, they moved to the roof in order to quickly sort everything out and go home. Just like Dad said, Haikon is now in the capital, accompanies foreign nobles to the great temple Herencia. The Holy Land where the great temple is located borders the capital of Rocham. The spell should lead them to him. It pointed in the opposite direction of Herencia, which greatly surprised Vermont. Having reached the place pointed to by the spell, Vermont and the baby saw a massacre, mercenaries fighting with villains. The brother was indignant at what the dog had done and closed the child's eyes. Vermont noticed a familiar emblem lying on the floor, and in the midst of the commotion, deftly pulled it towards him. This thing clearly belongs to someone from the nobility. The fight is over. The mercenaries take the children out, pointing out that all the kidnapped children are here. The captain stretches and orders them to clean up while he takes the money and returns. It seems that he knew where he needed to go and took on another job. Vermont decided to follow him. A little later, the captain comes to an abandoned house. Yes, in such places they are clearly doing something illegal. Turning, he asked if Vermont had decided to brighten up his day and fight him, to which the brother exhaled and kindly descended from the roof with his feet in the captain's face, thereby knocking him to the ground and asking if he really still wanted to fight. The captain was even more angry at this meeting, but he noticed the child and asked if Vermont had really managed to get married and have a child. Haikon picked up the baby, saying that since she is Vermont's sister, then she is his sister. Lucia was completely at a loss. Lucia's second brother is the captain of the invincible army of mercenaries famous throughout the continent. The girl was surprised. Are all the children of Lenore and Saria really so successful in life? Brother number 2 hugged the baby, saying that she looked like a fox, but her fur was strange silver pink. Vermont hurried his brother because his father was tired of waiting, but he refused to leave without payment. While waiting for the customer, Haikon played with his sister, which greatly irritated Vermont, but he, seized by her charms, refused to give up the child. Suddenly, a man with a hood covering his face entered the house. Haikon greeted him, calling him Your Eminence. The girl was dumbfounded. As a princess, she rarely saw the bishop. He appeared only at the most important celebrations. The bishop demanded proof that the children were saved. While examining it, Vermont noticed a brooch with the same emblem as he had seen earlier. Haikon reported that the slave traders were dead, and then gave the bishop what he asked for, some kind of covered sheet of paper. The man grabbed it, read it, and crumpled it. The commander asked the clergyman if he was interested in whether everything was all right with the children, to which he replied with a forced smile that he had no doubt that they were treating them well. The bishop was about to say goodbye when Vermont suddenly stopped him. Having given the child to his brother, he went to the clergyman. He was interested in where the slave traders got their pass to the great temple and why the bishop would turn to mercenaries, to which the man shrugged it off, emphasizing that he was too curious for a mercenary. Vermont apologized but continued. It seemed to him that the bishop was somehow connected with the slave trade. The man covered the brooch with his hand. He didn't care about the kids, he just wanted to cover his tracks. The bishop silently turned around, and waving his hand, knights began to come out from all sides. In parting, the man added that they would die today because of their curiosity. Vermont said that if God had known what the temple had become, he would have sent heavenly punishment upon them, to which the bishop cried out that he was following the will of God. He came to him. He saw him. Vermont tried to find a reasonable and safe way out of the situation, and then gave the command to the front. Haikon took out his sword and rushed into battle. The knights fell one after another. The bishop tried to escape, but Vermont stopped him with his magic. Haikon asked the bishop to remind him what would happen when there was no room for God in the temple. God will send great punishment. Even though Haikon had killed the bishop and the knights of the Holy Order, he felt relieved. Although his brother was clearly not happy about this, if not for his curiosity, Haikon would have taken the money and left. Vermont and Lucia returned home where their happily smiling father was waiting for them. The father pretended not to understand anything, although he knew how everything would turn out. It doesn't matter how powerful and famous a mercenary is, he's just a mercenary. If he decides to accuse a bishop of slave trading and a dead one at that, everyone will side with the temple. It's easier to blame the mercenaries. You can't discredit the honor of the temple. When Ianel was a princess, she judged only by appearance and had no idea what they really were like. If she hadn't been reborn, she wouldn't have known. But something bothered Vermont even more. It seems that the bishop is possessed by a divine beast. He almost revealed himself, but the mad dog killed him first. Haikon promised to arrive when he finished with his business. Elharan family is hosting a banquet. We need to introduce the future duchess to everyone. Vermont asked his father if he was sure to, which his father replied, "War is coming." Neither the prince nor the bishop would reveal their plans just like that. There is someone else behind them, and he has encroached on the domain of the Silver Foxes. Lenore won't just leave it like that. A serious battle awaits them. Daddy smiled and, touching the baby's face, said, "We have nothing to be afraid of." A few days later, Duke Elharan sent out an invitation to a banquet to all the nobles of the Rocham Empire, which would take place at his residence. On the invitation, it was written in large letters, "A banquet in honor of the young duchess, native daughter of Duke Elharan." They tried on dresses for Lucia. The child was exhausted. This was the 10th dress she was waiting for the servant to decide. And here it is nice, even by the standards of the capital. When suddenly, Aiden ordered the next dress to be carried. Even in her previous life, she had never been bullied like this, and the child screamed. Aiden exhaled and called a break. The butler brought sweets and lemonade. Lucia began to eat. She was embarrassed that he was just standing there and watching her eat, so the little girl tried to offer Aiden a cookie. Aiden sat down next to him, saying that Lady Lucia is not only a divine beast but also divinely sweet. An excited maid came in notifying that someone had taken the dress ordered for the Duchess. Aiden swore on his own name that he would return the dress. And after such a fiery speech, he returned empty-handed, locked himself in the room, and refused to come out. The father listened to the maid, and seeing his daughter's indignation, went in search. Aiden's memories. Walking down the street, he picked up an apple that a woman had dropped. When he tried to give it to her, she screamed. People began to turn around, and a man threw a stone at him with a monster scream. Aiden's skin was partially covered with snakeskin. Aiden's door, opening it, he saw the baby with the Duke. He said that everything was explained to him. Someone stole Saria's dress straight from the studio. The butler went to figure it out and then hid in the room. Lenore asked what happened. Aiden hesitated. He replied that he had met an acquaintance, and the Duke invited him with him. Aiden was alarmed by his behavior, to which he replied that he was going to return his wife's dress and the butler's honor. They headed to Gavrian's studio. The best dresses on the entire continent are sold here. The outfits created by Gavrian are popular both in the Empire and beyond. It is he who determines the direction of fashion. However, Gavrian does not care about fame or money. He creates only when inspiration comes. The nobility is measured not only by power or wealth, but also by the number of outfits from Gavrian. The father entered the studio. Seeing this handsome, stately man, the studio workers began to fuss. They asked what kind of dress he would like, to which the Duke replied yellow silk with lace and a large cutout on the chest. The girls panicked. Lenore ordered Gavrian to be called and sat down. The baby, being in Aiden's arms, watched as everyone was shaking with fear. She noticed how one of the workers looked at her with contempt. No, not at her, at Aiden. Lenore turned to this worker since he is standing and staring. Perhaps he wants to tell where the dress went. The princess's maid took him. While they were all working tirelessly, she simply took the dress. He didn't even have time to say that it was for the Duchess. The guy was lying, which even the little girl understood. Suddenly, a maid came in saying that the dress needed to be altered, it didn't fit. Lenore stood up and took the box with Saria's dress from her. The Duke asked to tell Princess Bianca that he ordered the dress for his wife. Her Highness liked it so much that the maid asked if the Duke would agree to give it to the princess. He is of course a Duke, but he would not dare to object to a member of the Imperial family. The maid continued to insist. Lucia was very worried. She wanted the maid to stop because she was afraid that her father might start a bloody massacre in broad daylight. Lenore, having learned that the princess tried it on, exhaled and said that he would have to order a new one. And with a calm expression, he tore the dress to shreds. Everyone stared at him in horror, and the Duke said that he would not allow his wife to walk around in some kind of cast-offs, because this is not possible. It is always quiet and calm in the forest of divine beasts. A month after Lucia was born, Lenore's only problem was finding the escaped baby. But in the human world, everything is different. The Imperial family never stops weaving intrigues, and due to the constant raids of barbarians, they have to be on guard all the time. In addition, Lenore was faced with a bunch of small problems, which in itself was unpleasant. He always approached problems in an unconventional way. Lenore was not one of those who would not follow someone else's orders. But that was too much! The maid angrily threatens the Count, saying that if the prince finds out, he will regret what he has done. The Count agrees, but coming closer, he asked what she thinks awaits her for stealing the dress of the Count's wife. The maid hurriedly leaves. Gavrion comes out to the guests. The workers rush to him in tears. He asks what happened. Lenore activates his charms. He apologizes for causing a commotion. He ordered a dress, but it turns out they were already wearing it. Lenore cannot allow his wife to wear a used dress, just as she cannot allow anyone else to wear it. But now she has nothing to wear to the banquet. He continued with the sweetest charisma that amazed everyone. He understood that there was very little time, but he begged him to sew another one. Gavrion was simply mesmerized by him. His eyes shone. He had no chance to refuse. Saying, "I'll pay whatever you want." Lenore handed over a blank check. Gavrion wrote the amount. But the Duke didn't like it, and he fixed something. Everyone present was shocked by what they saw. To 10 million, Lenore added 2 zeros. This was a mind-boggling amount of money for one single dress. Even the Imperial family could not afford such a thing. And with that, the Duke said goodbye. As they were leaving, they were discussing how well everything had gone, when suddenly that lying guy blurted out, "A monster!" And they stopped. The Duke said loudly and clearly that it seemed that the staff were not at all trained in manners. "They have nothing else to do here." The Count was blazing. Aiden was confused. The girl scolded the guy for his attitude towards clients. Lucia was angry. This guy first said all sorts of nasty things, and now he stared at them. If only she were older, she would give him such blows. While getting into the carriage, they heard a noise. The same mysterious melody began to play. For no apparent reason, the scoundrel fell unconscious. At breakfast, the little girl wondered what this strange melody. This time, she heard something similar to laughter. The servants arrived, notifying his lordship of Gavrion's arrival. Gavrion was very happy to meet. Gavrion apologized for the incident with the dress, and he was very sorry that he had to look for a replacement. But he came up with a new dress, not only for the Duchess, as agreed, but also for the young lady. He arrived to discuss some sketches. Lucia rejoiced. She fell in love with Gavrion with all her heart, who would free her from this hell with the fitting savior. Gavrion does not create children's clothing, but decided to make a dress especially for the little countess. There's no reason to refuse. Lucia saw the alarmed butler. When they returned home, Aiden sat as if nothing had happened. His face showed absolutely no emotion. The little girl knew nothing about his past, but she understood how those words hurt him. And now that moment has fluttered from my memory like a butterfly. When it was time to have a snack, the mask of equanimity fell away. Aiden cried. He said that he was not worthy to serve Duke El-Haran, when in fact everything rests on Aiden alone. The little girl was dumbfounded. He manages to cope with wayward gods who don't want to listen to anyone at all, and only Aiden can do all this. Aiden added that he never deserved to be his lordship's butler. Such a monster has no place in this world. Lucia did not expect to hear this. The baby screamed and crawled towards the butler, hugging Aiden. She tried to tell him that he was not a monster. Lucia could not express half of what she wanted to say, but still having given him the cookies, she was sure that he understood her. The fox did not know what happened between them. But even if Aiden did something bad, this is not a reason to spread gossip behind his back. She wondered if Aiden had done something monstrous. Dad has a great understanding of people. He trusts Aiden and Lucia too. Time kept passing, and finally the day came when Mom finished preparing for the Lucy ceremony. She's about to arrive. The divine beasts always perform this ceremony when someone is born. This is an important moment in the life of every animal. So Mom stayed in the forest to prepare everything. The petals swirled and burst into flames. Saria appeared from the circle. Saria rushed to Lucia, taking her tenderly in her arms. They forgot about Daddy, and he asked to be embraced by them. The lady tried on the dress. She was amazing. This is what happens when a genius gets to work. When suddenly the father ordered the following to be carried. The color is not the same. It does not emphasize the charm of the series. The following does not go with Lucy's dress. One more thing. He just doesn't like it. Caria's patience came to an end as soon as she wanted to say something. Lenore asked her to choose jewelry for Lucia. She did not choose her dress as carefully as Lucia's jewelry. Mom took a massive chain with a huge stone. Dad, looking at the situation, broke into a smile. Taking out a thin chain with a small rose from the box, he offered it. Like a real cunning fox, Dad said that the choice of wife, of course, was beautiful, but a little difficult for Lucia. The baby fell asleep, and her mother said that while she was preparing for the ceremony, the elders came. This was unexpected for my father. Father understood that it was strange to postpone the ceremony, but not so much that the elders would come. Saria said that Wasila is back. The father was surprised. Without a reason, he would not have moved. Perhaps he learned that Lucia had turned back into a fox. Vermont said that for some reason his magic wore off, and when Lucia turned, it immediately began to rain. Mom pointed out that Lucia is not like them. She is special. Lucia was born into a family of a silver fox and a red wolf. Usually in this case, the children belong to only one of the species. Each of the divine beasts has characteristics that are not characteristic of any species. Lucia is a silver fox, but she has pink ears and a tail. If Lucia really belongs to a separate species, something that Lenore and Saria would never want could happen. The baby woke up, stretched all her paws, and her father was lying next to her. Dad is certainly handsome, but we need to prepare for the banquet. Vermont entered their chambers looking for a hairball, and he began the spell of turning Lucia into a human. Father changed his clothes, but Vermont decided to stay in his robe, and they went to the banquet. The palace is exquisitely decorated. Guests gather and discuss the luxury surrounding them and the count. The door swung open, and the butler announced the arrival of the Duke and Duchess of Elharan. They looked amazing. The guests were shocked by their beauty, and by the fact that the Duke turned out to be not a scary old man. Someone said in a whisper that in comparison with the Duke, the Duchess was some kind of simpleton. They heard them because their hearing was better than that of humans. Mom will not forgive those who treated her disrespectfully. Lucia couldn't even imagine what would happen if she got angry. The guests made noise, and two men entered the hall tower caretaker and mercenary Captain Hyken, that same mad dog. There were whispers, people saying that of course there were rumors that the Duke had hired security for his daughter. But who would have thought that it would be the Runhild sorcerer and the mad dog? Now you can't even come within 100 steps of the young Duchess. The Duke introduces the arriving guests. Mr. Vermont and Mr. Hyken agreed to honor them with their presence at the celebration of Lou and Stella's birthday, also adding that these are not all the guests of this evening. Others no less highly esteemed will soon arrive. Trumpets sounded, signaling the arrival of new guests. The butler represents HRH Crown Prince Agris de Rochim, as well as HRH Princess Bianca. The nobles greeted each other. The prince asked to forgive them for being late. He turned to the Duchess, saying that he was glad to finally meet her in person. The Duchess introduced herself in proper form. Agris noticed the child in Saria's arms and turned to her, saying how glad he was to meet you. Ianel remembered the night he killed her and their father, and she brazenly turned away from the prince. He suggested to his parents that if they would allow him, he would like to become their daughter's godfather. The guests were amazed. It would be an incredible honor for any noble family if the prince himself, the future emperor, offered to become the godfather of their children. But the Imperial family and Duke Elharan are not so close. In other words, this proposal is an attempt to improve relationships. How ironic that the villain who killed Yanel now claims to be the godfather. Mom refused him, saying that they had already chosen a godfather for their daughter. The father and the prince went away to talk. The girls tried to approach Saria to get to know her better, praising her outfit, and her daughter. They asked for forgiveness for disturbing them. The little girl thinks they want to talk to Saria, but they are afraid because she looks distant and arrogant, and Vermont and Haikon are not particularly friendly. The girls argued in whispers that something else needed to be said. Saria smiled and thanked them, saying that their lovely dresses were no worse than hers. The guest asked what the young duchess's name was, to which Lucia wanted to answer herself, and proudly introduced herself as Usha. Lucia hid in shame. Vermont and Haikon turned away, trying to hold back their laughter. The girls glowed looking at this sweetest creature. Bianca came up to greet them and introduce herself Sarayant Rocham, and she offered to chat. Her father, Duke Sarayant, really wanted to go to the banquet, but unfortunately he is not feeling well. She asked the Duchess if she had a middle name. Bianca thought that she was the only daughter of the Duke, the companion of the Crown Prince. The future Empress, the Duchess, was probably ashamed of her magnificence, to which Saria coldly replied no. The princess suggested that she needed to apologize, to which the Duchess replied that she had not offended her at all. I tried to humiliate my mother with my title, but it didn't work. Suddenly, the lady with whom the princess approached began to lower her glass. Lucia did not want her mother's dress to be ruined and reached out in an attempt to stop her. The girl spilled champagne on the girl, and she screamed, which drew the attention of those present to the current situation. The brothers rushed to help Haikon grab the bottle, broke it, and put the fragment to the culprit, asking if she wanted to die. The princess stood up for the lady, saying that Lady Azrael simply slipped up and waited for an apology from Saria for the behavior of her subordinate. The Duchess stopped her son, saying that they wanted to ruin her dress, but they doused her girl, and you won't get an apology from them, adding that the young Duchess will not soon be able to appear in high society. The princess was offended and rushed away. Lenore approached, saying to do with the princess as she wishes, since parents must be responsible for their children. The mother gave her daughter to her brother and asked the guests not to pay attention and enjoy the banquet. Lucia felt hot, as if she was being torn apart from the inside. Haikon became worried. There was a flash of light, and the child turned into a fox. Haikon turned to his brother, but he was not there. At that time, Vermont watched an unknown palace burn. It was urgent to find my brother. Haikon hid the baby on the terrace, ordering her not to stick her head out. He would be back soon. The banquet is in full swing. Lucia is hiding in the corner of the terrace. No one will come here for sure. Suddenly, looking for a flash of light, Agris entered. He saw a small silver fox, which was very surprising. The little girl got nervous. Suddenly, an unknown voice ordered her to run. Lucia was at a loss. There was nowhere to run. A voice showed her the way. Agris extended his hand to the fox, and she rushed. The girl was tired. She stopped in the hope that she managed to get away, but the voice screamed about trouble. Terrible trouble. He is here. Scary. How scary? She turned around and saw Perrin Abelard. She wanted to ask him for help, but she remembered how he protected her in a past life. But besides that, he did not help anyone. Footsteps were heard. Agris was catching up with her, and Lucia, panicking, threw herself on Perrin's back, hiding under her cloak. They greeted each other, and Agris asked if he had seen the silver animal, to which he answered negatively. Agris started talking about Princess Ionel, saying how painful it is for him to remember her because she was so kind and sweet until she went crazy, adding that it was all his fault. He should have paid more attention to her, taken better care of her. Then everything could have been different. He was a bad brother and asked what Sir Abelard thought about it, but he only replied that he had nothing to say. Only one person knew the answer. Her Highness, only she can tell you how it all happened. Abelard's first memory. This could have been a real disaster. Born without parents, not belonging to any of the divine beasts. The elders said that even their best knights might not be able to cope with another cataclysm. But the divine beasts protested they would not allow them to kill an innocent child. Nothing bad has happened yet. These events sowed discord. Opinions were divided. Abelard remembered everything as if it had happened yesterday. In the end, they decided to let him live, but there were those who were still afraid of the very fact of its existence. For safety's sake, they put him in chains. Having learned to transform into a human, he left the forest of divine beasts and went to the human world. Having neither home nor family, he only wandered aimlessly, and he decided to join the ranks of the emperor, to understand what he can achieve. A spontaneous decision, a desire to dispel boredom and brighten up gray everyday life. So he became the princess's bodyguard. She was 16 when they first met. At first glance, she was the most ordinary princess, but still something distinguished her from others. She cared about her subjects. Everyone around loved Ianol. Her sincerity could not leave anyone indifferent. She infected everyone with her ringing laugh. She was as kind to Peyran as she was to the others. And although she annoyed Peyran, he wanted more of her attention to himself than to the others. Sometimes he felt uncomfortable with his feelings. He was happy with life and work. But one day they were caught in a rainstorm, and the princess said that she was sure that Abelard would become a hero. His name would spread throughout the continent. Of course, everyone will know who will cause the disaster. He thought the princess was beautiful. Her smile was captivating. It was then that he began to feel something strange. It seemed like nothing had changed, but every day he seemed to become stupider. Abelard, that if he moved away from her, this feeling would disappear. So he did, directly stating his intentions. He went to the front. Southern front line. The castle is on fire. He went to war to be away from the princess. It seemed that there would be no time to think about the princess. Only death surrounded him. In the heat of the chaos of battle, he tried to forget the only thing that made his heart flutter. But how could he control it? Among the dust, the fire that engulfed the field when he swung his sword when someone's life was in the balance, he remembered her. He must have gone crazy. He cannot see the princess with such thoughts. He went to the front, but even far from her, he could not forget her. No matter how hard he tried to deny the truth, in the end, he had to accept it. He had never experienced anything like this before, but he decided to end this war. This way he will earn everyone's respect. He will become a hero, just like she said, and return to the palace. Perhaps then she will smile at him again. He won victory after victory. The high priest, amazed by his dedication, appointed Abelard captain of the knights. Still, he became a hero, famous throughout the continent. Surely the princess could not even imagine how her words would affect him. He wondered what she would say now, what she would wish, just to see her smile again. But the princess never knew who he became. When he returned, she was dead. After Abelard's answer, Agri left. He took out the fox from under his cloak and asked if the Duke had not warned him not to get caught in people's sight. Lucia worriedly remembered the 3 rules of divine beasts. Abelard promised to return her to her parents. Suddenly, the alarmed brothers ran up to them. Haikon took the baby from the lord, thinking that he had kidnapped her. Lucia rebelled but could not explain everything. Vermont demanded an explanation. Abelard spoke about the prince. Vermont didn't understand how this could happen twice. Haikon kindly suggested that if the character is crappy, then the magic is not very good. Abelard was surprised whether the baby still couldn't turn into a human. The brothers got angry. Vermont offered to show him what happens to those who offend Lucia. Vermont explained that she does not yet know how to transform herself, so he is forced to constantly maintain the transformation spell. But for some unknown reason, she turns back. If this happens in public, there will be no problems. Abelard offered to help Lou and Stella turn into a human. There was a real buzz that day. The Duke himself and his wife appeared in public for the first time in a long time, and besides, they showed off their lovely daughter. The Duke's family, who silently defended the northern borders, gave a truly magnificent reception. There was also a quarrel with the Imperial family. Now the high society has to take one of the sides. Vermont tells his father that the prince saw Lucia in animal form. Fortunately, Peyran passed by and helped her. He also promised to help her learn to turn into a human. The father did not like this and decided that it was time to send a message to Mohian. After the banquet, Lucia firmly decided to learn to walk. As soon as the servants found out about this, they immediately arranged everything so that she would not get hurt no matter where she fell. The father entered the room, notifying Hikon that they were leaving soon. Peyran was waiting for them. The little girl thought about it. Agris is sure that Dad wants to seize the throne, and now the relationship between them is completely ruined, and so he openly went to meet with the commander of the knights himself. This means that the father wants political attention. Arriving at the palace, the servant announced that Sir Abelard was now absent. The father was surprised that such a grumbler had friends. A boy came out to them asking what was going on here. The guests were perplexed. The boy looked very much like Abelard. The boy greeted the guests and introduced himself as Duke Abelard's cousin, Ian. The little girl was surprised at their similarity. Was he really a divine beast too? The father asked if they could wait for Peyron here. Ian led them into the room and asked if they had come on this matter, and his father answered in the affirmative. Abelard's request he would speak only to the young duchess, and they left the baby with the young teacher. Ian asked Lucia if she could become a fox. She waved no. This means she cannot become either a man or a beast. He apologized and touched her forehead with his finger. While casting the spell, he concluded that she was a special species, the existence of which will lead to disaster. The baby tensed. Long ago, the divine beasts joined forces to prevent an impending disaster. All inhabitants of the continent know this from an early age. Divine beasts are born from fragments of the soul of the Creator God. Of course, this rarely happens, but sometimes the broken piece turns out to be larger than the rest. Then, a special species appears. Such animals are closest to God. However, it is difficult to control such a huge force, and in the end, it breaks out, leading to a global catastrophe. The baby trembled. Ian apologized to the young duchess and took her in his arms. She didn't want the people closest to her to get hurt. The boy offered to show her something. They went out into the garden, and he covered her eyes with his hand. When she opened them, she was surprised that nothing had changed. When suddenly she noticed pink butterflies, they were worriedly saying that Lucia had been caught. What should they do? The boy explained that it was perfume. They noticed that she saw them and headed towards her. Lucia was surprised because she was told that after the disaster, the divine beasts lost contact with the spirits. The spirits were running away from Ian. Ian told the little girl to wait for her at the fountain. She kept wondering if he was also a special species. But why were they afraid of him, but not her? The spirits spoke to Lucia. They asked if they were beautiful and invited her to touch herself. She touched the butterfly when suddenly the butterfly turned into a fox. They played with her. Some turned into birds, and fish tickled her, rejoiced at the girl's smile. Lucia couldn't resist and almost fell into the water, but the spirits supported her. In order to calm the child, the spirits decided to sing. The same tune that played every time she was in danger began to play. The spirits helped her out even when she was reborn. Ian came to pick her up. The spirits made noise saying that he was a bad person. The boy said that the bishop was here, it was better not to interfere with him. The girl didn't understand. The bishop had an impeccable reputation. Ian was even dressed like a novice, and there were spirits everywhere. A melody began to play, and a bright light flashed. The spirits tried to save Lucia. There were many more of them. Lightning struck, and they began to circle around the tower. The story returns to the trial of the harbinger of disaster. Lenore intervenes, saying that no matter what, you can't kill a newborn. He hasn't done anything yet. He won't allow this. Everyone still argued for a long time, but in the end, Peyron was saved. True, they put a collar on him that prohibited the use of divine powers. The elders pretend to be merciful, but in reality, they are just a bunch of scum. Their skin is more important to them than someone else's life, Lenore thought. Now he remembered why he left the council. Peyron is still very young. In human form, he is supposed to be a teenager, but with the help of his powers, he can transform into an adult. However, when the magic is unstable, he returns to his normal form to recover. Hikon noticed that apparently Peyron was still out of his mind. The father contacted Manhwa and said that Peyron asked if it was possible to bring a person back to life. When he came to the forest, he asked the elders for help right in front of everyone. That's where the rumor started that he had gone crazy. Hikon became nervous, asking if his father was sure that he could trust Lush, to which the father replied that he would not harm the child. Opening the door, they saw the bishop, accompanied by knights which they were clearly not happy about. The father asked to forgive them, but they were here on another matter, to which His Eminence replied that he knew that's why he came, because they would never have looked at him. He infuriated Lenore wildly. It was difficult for him to explain, but it felt as if he had somehow guessed that Lenore was a divine beast. The bishop called the duke for a few words. He said that there was a terrible fire in the house of the Marquis Azarel, and Lenora is suspected of arson. The father was surprised the bishop continued. Only the room of the marquis and marquise burned down. Rumor has it that there was some magic involved. In addition, during the banquet, the marquis behaved rudely towards his wife. There are rumors that it was Lenore who hired the caretaker of the tower for this. Lenore laughed, saying that if the keeper of the tower himself had listened to him, he would have long ago achieved independence for the duchy. I myself thought that it seemed they had been figured out. On that day, Vermont decided to wipe the Marquis's family from the face of the empire. But Lenore promised Saria that there would be no problems finally telling his son that it was impossible for the Marquis and Marquise to die on his daughter's birthday. In the end, they compromised and decided to simply burn down their house. Lenore has no idea who could have done this. The priest continued saying that not long ago the bishop went to the Creator, and since then, strange things began to happen. He hoped that his lordship would refrain from senseless killings. Waving off the bishop's hand, the duke replied that only if his eminence showed him the right path. The bishop gave a menacing look. Afterwards, having become more cheerful, he casually asked to introduce him to the young duchess. The father replied that she was still just a baby and was afraid of strangers. The bishop, as if not hearing, looked towards the house looking for the girl. The father was very irritated, wondering why this old fox needed his daughter. Suddenly, they saw a flash of light and lightning that destroyed the sacred tower. The bishop lost consciousness. The father did not understand what had happened. He and his son were worried whether this was really the work of Lucia's forces. The spirits boasted of their powers to the girl. Lucia tried to stop them, but they didn't even listen to her. Ian called upon other spirits, and they immediately devoured the pranksters. Everything was quiet. The boy said, "Here it is the power of a special kind, their burden." Now Lucia had an idea of what could happen if she got out of control. An incredibly powerful force that cannot be resisted. If she doesn't learn to control it, things could turn out much worse. Gasping for breath, the boy fell to the ground saying not to trust anyone. He grabbed his neck, and she saw the seal and scratches. Ian forbade her to come near him. The boy was writhing in pain. Lucia could not leave him with her neck torn to the point of bleeding. She tried to help him, and suddenly he saw Princess Ayanel in front of him and called her by name. Dad and brother came running, and the father took the baby in his arms. He couldn't believe that her power was out of control, so something will have to be done. Lucia fell asleep. In the dream, she reflected that she and Ian belonged to a special species and could see spirits and use their power. And what is this? The strange tattoo looks like it's holding Ian back, causing pain when he uses force. She worried that she would face the same fate if she did not learn to control the spirits. She was sorry that he was suffering because of her. She wondered why he called her Ayanel. Had they really met in a past life? No, she would remember. By the way, she came here to learn how to turn into a human, but so far there has been no progress. The next time they meet, she will definitely ask him. The bishop reported on what happened to Vasil. They discussed secret matters, and Vasila ordered not to take his eyes off the young duchess. Big changes are coming, and they don't need problems. On his knees, the bishop assured that he would take care of everything, calling Wasila the master. A month has already passed, and all this time, Lucia's family has been taking care of her. They brought her to her chambers after she lost consciousness and did not leave for a minute. They seemed to look at her differently. In her previous life when she was sick, the servants took good care of her. They were close, but still they were not her family. Her father never even had time to visit her. Although she was surrounded by care, she felt so alone. Now she is not alone, but they are going too far. 2 days later. Sitting on his brother's lap, Haikon reassured her because he thought that Lucia was worried about the upcoming ceremony. Suddenly, Vermont fell on their heads. Seeing Lucia with deft movements, he took her away from his brother, inviting him to a picnic. They knew nothing about picnics. Lucia watched in surprise. Wondering if her brothers had never been to picnics, Vermont suggested going to one of the popular places and simply repeating the others. Haikon suggested stocking up on food for a week and asked whether it would be enough, for which his brother kicked him, and Hikan went to get lunch. The baby exhaled. At least Vermont behaved adequately, and he suddenly said that he hoped that his brother would not forget the sofa. After much trial and error, they set off. The baby turned to her brothers with a request to look around. They waved approvingly. Without the baby, they don't even have anything to talk about. Hikan noted that they are like elderly parents who do not want their child to grow up. The little girl studied the park appraisingly. It was beautiful. Everything was done with taste, quite lively. When suddenly I accidentally ran into a boy. She fell. The boy, holding out his hand, apologized and asked if she had hurt herself. The little girl answered in the negative and smiled sweetly. The boy was struck by her smile. Taking her hand completely seriously, he shouted a marriage proposal. Hearing this, Vermont dropped the basket. Hyken tore the blanket. Apparently, the brothers were not happy with their sister's new friend. Due to the torn blanket, they had to team up with the children and an elderly woman. The adults felt extremely awkward. The boy introduced himself. His name is Ilix, and this is his twin sister, and asked what the baby's name is. The girl introduced herself as. Lucia hesitated and corrected it to Lucia. Ilix noticed what a wonderful name she had, and he's smart. He pretends not to notice how those two are looking at him. He will go far. His sister, on the other hand, looks sweet and modest. She opened the box and offered Lucia a treat. Until this day, neither in her past life nor in this life did Lucia communicate with her peers. Her father always overprotected her, so she could only communicate with the maids. Lucia was happy to make new acquaintances. It was quite fun. The brothers endured with all their might. Suddenly, a boy ran up with a bucket of earth and scattered it on their food. He shouted joyfully that now everything corresponds to their situation. Lucia screamed furiously for him to apologize. Apologize now! He came and ruined their picnic. He believes that he can behave this way because of the difference in status. The girl wondered if the future of the Rohirrim Empire was really so sad. Hikon took a bottle out of the basket. Seeing that Lucia noticed his intentions, he awkwardly pressed the bottle to himself and smiled. Vermont's face was inflamed with a thirst for revenge. Lucia was torn, trying to distract them. Rumors must not be allowed to spread that a fight had broken out in the park because of the young duchess. The bully shouted that she was a coward, hiding behind adults, to which the brothers replied that he had a chance to escape unharmed. But now one word from Lucia, and they would kill him. The bully and the gang ran away. Lucia calmed her friend down, but indignant ladies approached them and began shouting at the baby. Above the Elharan family is only the Emperor's family. They recognized Lucia, so they apologized and immediately left. The boy was very upset. He just wanted to spend time with his bride. Lucia said that it was too early for her to be a bride, but they could still be friends. Maritime Empire city of Balain, praising the beauty of the area, saying that it is thanks to his friend Lenore, greets the hiding Mohianta. The father explained that Lucia's birthday ceremony was coming soon, and it seems his daughter belongs to a special species, and he wouldn't want anyone to know about it. All divine beasts remember the story of Perron. Lenore will not stand by while his daughter is bullied, and that's why he needs Mohian's help. He agreed, saying that he would open the vault so Lenore could take what he needed to contain her power, to which Lenore replied that he did not need it. Saria is already in storage and will take what she needs. Mohiant asked if he had not agreed they would have robbed his vault, to which the father replied that he still allowed it.